Hello and welcome back. Welcome back to the Business of Happiness podcast. Hello, all my incredible women dentists. Thank you again for everything you do every day, for literally putting smiles on children's faces on a daily basis, and for showing up for your patients, for your team, for your community, for your family. And today we're talking about the B word. That is so present in dentistry in this day and age, and that is the burnout word. And what I'm trying to remind you of in this episode is that burnout is not about not having enough time. Burnout is about boundaries. When I opened my first practice is when I learned the hard way about boundaries. Maybe you've heard me talk about this here on the podcast, but my first orthodontic practice was a home office. I don't even know if those exist anymore. Have you ever walked into a home office? Well, I had one. I purchased a home office. I purchased the home. I purchased the office. I lived in the home. It was a split level ranch, and it was so sweet and cute. And thank goodness for that beautiful practice at that time in my life, because my husband was in his residency and I never saw him in his surgical residency. And I had 2 babies and a practice. And I was just surviving at the time, but I was treating my patients downstairs and I was feeding and loving and living with my babies upstairs. And there were no boundaries. There were no boundaries. And can you imagine? I was at the end of every day coming straight back down to work after I put the kids to bed after a full day of treating patients and making dinner and cleaning up and finally getting the babies to bed. What did I do? I just went right back downstairs and did treatment plans late into the night. There were no boundaries for me in terms of when I turned my day off and when I created time for myself. I mean, I was blurring those boundaries constantly. And I'll never forget, patients would just show up at my door. When I was nursing my babies when they were very young, I would go upstairs at lunchtime, and if they weren't awake to nurse, I would pump. All the women who are listening to me right now who have pumping stories, I know you're just smiling as you're listening to this, because there are always pumping stories. And I had one of those backpacks that you wear. The whole pumping mechanism was in a backpack, and then I had this bustier that I strapped on with a pump on each boob. Can you imagine? I mean, it was so efficient, and I was all about efficiency. What is the maximum amount of milk that I could pump during a half-hour lunch break? And I remember going upstairs, pumping while I'm opening the fridge and trying to eat. And I have so many stories of people showing up unannounced at the back door and me turning around with this pump attached to my boobs. Can you imagine? The boundaries were just non-existent here. There was no clarity of physical boundaries. And the boundaries are how we let people in. See, this is the confusion around boundaries, is we think boundaries are how we keep people out, the walls, but it's actually the clarity of how we let people in. Take that beautiful house of mine for an example. If I had better clarity, this is where patients enter. This is the front of the practice. They wouldn't be walking around the whole house looking for how to access me if the front door was locked, if the practice door was locked during lunchtime, if I was clear. See, one of the most important things around boundaries is clarity and communication. And it looks different for every single practice. The physical location looks different. Your signage looks different. The design, the shape, the way your practice is laid out. We create boundaries, physical boundaries, as a way to create space to treat our patients in. And then we create those boundaries for ourselves at home. That's one of the big reasons why I don't love having TVs in my room, my bedroom, because that boundary is for my sleep. It's not for my watching TV. It's for my sleep. And creating those physical boundaries is how we better take care of ourselves. It makes it easier. We have so many decisions to make during the day. When we're creating boundaries, it takes away from additional decision making that we need to show up for and create space for. So creating those boundaries is how we better treat our patients. It's how we better show up for them. Even the rooms themselves. I'm sure you have a specific size and shape room for specific procedures, whether it's taking radiographs or it's surgical cases or it's just a quick check. Those are also creating clear boundaries, not just for your patients, but for your team and for yourself, so that when you show up in that space, energetically, you're ready for whatever is going to happen in that space. And every practice looks different. Last week, I was visiting a phenomenal dentist here in Maine. She opened her practice a couple years ago. And when she was designing the practice, she had somebody I think she was an architecture design expert, architectural designer, and she designed several dental practices for her. And she said to her, okay, we have one sink in a room. And my client or my friend who is a dentist said, no, I want 2 sinks in every treatment, in every operatory. And the designer was losing her mind, saying how expensive that would be. And that was so ridiculous. But for my friend, for this dentist, she is left-handed. And she explained, hey, if I ever sell this practice, I want to be sure that there's a sink on both sides, that whoever else comes in can use the space appropriately. They don't have to spend money to redo the whole space. For her, her space requires 2 sinks. See, nobody knows except you what your requirements are for your physical space. You get to decide, especially as a business owner. It's such an important logistical component of what we do, is recognizing what boundaries we create. And so you can hear in my story of this dentist who opened her own practice, who built it from scratch, her boundaries she had to create with her designer. Look, I want you to design this beautiful space, but here are the boundaries within which you are playing. Please respect those boundaries. And if you hear in my language, it's about the communication of it and the clarity of it. So yes, no one can tell you what your specific space should look like. We get great guidelines from experts, but absolutely you get to decide. You also create boundaries in terms of time slots, in terms of your schedule. So how we create that schedule is so important. And once again, no one else can tell you what you need in terms of those time boundaries. You know, for the longest time, I've kept hiring people to tell me how to make my schedule more efficient. And I kept running up against problems because it wasn't working for my team and my treatment style and my treatment type. I needed to be very clear around the boundaries that I needed for myself, because those boundaries allow patients clarity over the appointment types they have. So we have different appointment types. And so often you'll get some frustration from patients who say, well, I can't come at that time of day. In ortho, this happens often when we have longer appointments, like putting braces on or taking braces off. Those are longer appointments, and we like to have those in the morning hours. And many times you might hear a parent complain, well, she has to come after school. We can't miss any school. But remember, the boundaries are how we better take care of our patients. It's how we love them. If you want to put them in really simple terms, it's how you show up for them, because you can't have a long appointment in the middle of the afternoon when you have 7 other patients at the same time, but then you're not giving that patient the attention she needs and deserves. And that's the scripting I would give my office manager or my front desk or my scheduling coordinator is, you know what? in order to do our very best for Sarah, we need to put her in this specific time in the day. Because if they were at any other time in the day, we couldn't give her what's so important, what she deserves, and our unique attention. So we create these specific appointment types for this specific procedure so that we can do our very best for her. And I never had a patient complain after I explained it that way. So recognizing those boundaries are definitely for you. They're definitely for the benefit of the practice. And they're for the benefit of the patient as well. Boundaries are how we let people in. And that's true in our private lives as well. When we create those boundaries, it's not just, and yes, it's very often a way of keeping people out. This is my time. This is my space. This is my energetic space. And these are the rules of engagement. This is how I can let you in. These are the hours of the day. These are the parameters when I'm available and can be energetically available to you. And what's so important is the boundaries are communicated with clarity and kindness. And sometimes people need to hear them a few times. We show them on social media, and then we show them in their welcome packet, and then we tell them on the recording on the answering machine or the answering message. We tell them at every appointment. It's okay that we sometimes have to repeat boundaries. Sometimes with loved ones, we have to repeat boundaries. And that's okay, especially if you're changing them up, especially if the rules are changing. And that's such an important point, is as women who are dentists, possibly a practice owner, but even if you're not, giving yourself permission to shift and change the parameters of your boundaries throughout your career, throughout your life. It is so important. You do not have to practice today the same way you practiced 10 years ago or the same way you practiced last month. You get to shift those boundaries because there are certain seasons in our lives where we need more or less, where we need to be a little bit more clear, when we need to have a little bit more time. There are times in the month even where we need to maybe set boundaries a little bit differently. Your body is a different body from week to week during the month hormonally. And now what we're talking about is very specifically creating energetic boundaries. And this is so important when it comes to creating and setting and establishing and holding true the boundaries for ourselves. And this might be the most important point of this entire conversation. Clarity with yourself. You know those communication skills I was just talking about? How clear can we be? How graceful and forgiving can we be in terms of reestablishing those boundaries over and over and over again? Can we do the exact same for ourselves? What that requires is being very clear and very aware with yourself. It requires paying attention. Energetically, how do you feel? How do you feel? And being very honest with yourself. So from a very high level perspective, this can look like just times during the day. When do you have more energy? Personally, I am a morning person. I have so much energy in the morning, but that's not true for everyone. So just like everyone's practice doesn't look the same, everyone's schedule doesn't look the same, neither does your energetic needs. Yours is yours. So for me, I have most energy early in the morning. So I like to schedule challenging conversations or challenging procedures or things that I don't love to do that take a little bit more of my effort and my energy in the morning, because that's when I'm my freshest. That's when I do my best. And then the more everyday procedures, the common procedures, the easier, the checks, the quick ones, I save those for after 3:00 when I'm a little bit lower in terms of energy. And that's not necessarily true for everyone. Maybe for you, your mornings are sacred because you want to take your kids to school and drop them off. You don't want to start your patient care till later in the morning because that's refueling your energy, having time with your kids and doing that really precious drop off, just a few years that we have with our kids in that sense. Maybe that's your way of spending your mornings. There are no right or wrong rules because if that's what refuels you, then you show up to your patients energetically better. And I know what you're thinking, Tarryn, I can't change my schedule because of, and then here's where all your mind will feed you so many excuses to keep you stuck in old boundaries and keep you from shifting and being more malleable and pivoting for your own sake to give yourself what you need. Maybe you're thinking, my team won't allow for that. Well, I'm going to invite you to just reconsider. Your team might love it. Maybe they also want time to drop kids off at school. Maybe they also want a couple hours without the dentist there so that they can get projects done. You never know. It's the excuses that we create for ourselves that keep us stuck. But you actually get to choose how you reserve and preserve your energy. And it's unique to you. And maybe your mind's telling you, well, wait a minute, Tarryn, I'm not the owner of my practice. I'm just an associate here. Well, I'm going to invite you again to reconsider. Could you be advocating for yourself differently? I was speaking to another client a few weeks ago, and she hadn't even considered asking her boss if she could come in at 9. And she asked, and he said, absolutely, I don't see why not. It's sometimes our minds come up with these excuses and these reasons why we can't take action on protecting our own energetic boundaries. And it's only because you haven't tried. It's only because you haven't tried, and the unknown is scary, and your mind lives in being safe. It wants to keep you safe, so it loves familiarity. And sometimes we choose familiarity over what is best for ourselves. So remembering that I told you that boundaries aren't just a way to keep people out, they're actually a way to welcome people in. And the same is true for energetic boundaries. It's not just to protect the energy that we have, to keep from siphoning off and losing that amount of energy that we have in the morning. It's actually how we fuel more energy. It's actually how we increase our energy. When we pay attention to what our body needs and what we need in order to feel fulfilled. And that word fulfilled speaks about energy. And I want to just repeat this again, that there are no two people that experience this or have the same needs, that experience it in the same way or have the same needs. It's just not the way it is. And this is where it takes courage to pay attention to yourself and to give yourself permission to be the very best that you can be. Because that feels really good. But we can only be the best we can be when we're paying attention to those energetic boundaries that are really specific to us. So I actually happen to be having a masterclass all about this coming up on May 7th. So if you're listening to this episode, it's before May 7th, 2025, please go to thisdentistneedstobreathe.com. Yes, you heard me right. Thisdentistneedstobreathe.com. I'm talking about energetic boundaries, and it's a free masterclass. I'd love to see you there. It's specifically for women dentists. And we're talking all about this exact thing, how to establish those boundaries and how to really grapple with that voice in your head that's saying, I can't because, and really give yourself a new perspective and a new sense of empowerment. Because taking care of our energy, and we'll talk about what that really means, but I think that you get my gist here. You know how you feel when you're run down. You know how you feel when you're fueled up, when you're feeling really excited and empowered. You know the difference between those two feelings. That's energy. So how to protect and preserve and refuel that energy in terms of boundaries and being more flexible and fluid with them. even in dentistry. I know, it's possible. In fact, it's how we get greater capacity. It's how we grow bigger offices. The limiting reaction here is not your patients. It's not the number of patients you have. The limiting, reagent, not reactant. The limiting reagent is you and your energy. And when we learn how to expertly create those boundaries, nothing can stop us. It's actually an incredible superpower. And it's also what I end every episode with. When you hear me say, when you feel good, you can do good, I'm actually referring to that energetic reserve that you have. So listening to your body and also understanding how to not let your mind stop you from asking for what you need. The boundaries we set with ourselves turn out to be the most important kind. So as you go out into your week, I'm going to leave you with a couple of questions just to pose to yourself. How are you honoring your boundaries at work? And are there any boundaries that need to be established or reestablished? Maybe physical ones, maybe ones in terms of time, maybe ones that need to be communicated a little bit better. And what I really would love for you to identify is your energetic boundaries. And what needs to happen in order for you to respect your own energetic boundaries? Because when you feel good, you know what I'm going to say, that is when you can do good. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Business of Happiness podcast. If this episode brought you new perspective and value, I invite you to subscribe so that you catch all upcoming episodes and leave us a review. And if you know of a friend or colleague who could benefit from this perspective, share this episode with them and empower their day. For more information about the Business of Happiness and the Radical Happiness for Practitioners course, find me on www.thebizofhappiness.com. See you there.